Welcome everyone to today's webinar, introducing OneCloud Data Prep and how to harmonize your data in an intuitive and interactive manner with OneCloud. Today's speaker is Tony Scalise, OneCloud's Chief Customer Success Officer, and we're very happy you could join us. The webinar will be recorded, so if you want to listen to it back later, you can. And if you have any questions, please just submit them in the Q&A box on the bottom bar of your Zoom meeting, and we'll address them later. On that note, Tony, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're very excited to talk to you today about OneCloud Data Prep. Consider this the official launch party or the launch announcement, however you want to think about it. This is a product that we've been working on for some time now, and we're incredibly excited to tell the world about it. So let's go ahead and get started. So quickly, just a kind of agenda-wise, we'll be talking a little slide presentation here, a little bit of background about what OneCloud is, what OneCloud Data Prep is, and how it all comes together. And then we're going to get right into a live demonstration of the product and show you some of the really powerful features and capabilities of OneCloud Data Prep. But we want to set the stage a bit. What does data prep mean, and how do we do that? If you follow us on social media or follow our blog, you'll see recently we've done a whole series around data preparation as a discipline. If you haven't seen that, by all means, check out our blog, onecloud.io/blog, and you can see that was a 5-part series, very quick reads, but help kind of level set what the discipline is and how we can help you in it. But let's talk a little bit about why OneCloud. Our mission is to connect the enterprise and to be able to enable everybody to have timely, accurate, and reliable data. So when we think about what does our enterprise look like, there's a lot of different elements here, whether it's analytics, finance-related, sales-related, FP&A, HR, all the different pieces of information that are out there. We want to help you connect that enterprise together so that you can see the full picture. Now, OneCloud is the company, and previously our product was called OneCloud as well. So we had OneCloud the company, OneCloud the product. We've gone through a bit of a rebrand with the launch of OneCloud Data Prep. And so what you know as OneCloud, or what you historically knew as OneCloud the product, is now referred to as OneCloud Integration Studio. We're launching OneCloud Data Prep as well. The two work in concert with one another. So Integration Studio, you can still rely on that for the business users to be able to create, manage, and execute integrations. Data Prep is allowing the users to harmonize the data and to make a relationship between the different enterprise systems that you're connecting together. So when we think about how OneCloud empowers integration, empowers the connected enterprise, we think of integration as 3 distinct steps: extract, transform, and load. So if we think about where our products fit in that, Integration Studio really targets extract and load. Do those things very well, and we empower the business user to manage that process. Data Prep really elevates our capability to do the transformation layer and allow the business users to manage that. So now we have an entire integration cycle that you can own as a business user through OneCloud, the platform. So you're familiar with OneCloud Integration Studio today. If you're not, just a quick overview. We support over 60 different technologies, so bi-directional data exchange between those. Again, in the ET&L layer, this is the E and the L. And then we get right into data prep, where here is where we're building that relationship of the data between the different systems. We know that these systems each have data that's important to us, but we need to build a relationship between them and allow that data to flow between them, because they usually look different. They have different data models. And so data prep gives us the ability to handle that transformation that allows that data to move between them. So when we think about transformation, there's 2 ways that we really kind of classify this activity. There's the technical transformation. What am I doing to the data when I get it out of the system in terms of getting it ready to go into another system to support the load of data into another system. So maybe I need to do something with the columns in there. Maybe I need to remove columns. Maybe I need to add columns that aren't part of the data set. Maybe I need to add row numbers, things of that nature. That's more technical transformation. Those are things that we need to do regardless because of the different data models that exist between the systems. On the functional transformation side, this is, if we think about these in common terms that make sense to people, this is mapping. This is building a relationship between the different systems and what their codes are. So if in my general ledger, I've got a natural account that's 5 digits, and in my performance management system, it's actually a string value or text-based value. Well, I can build that relationship in the functional transformation side of this. And we have really great features around both of these types of transformations that I'm going to show you in just a bit here. But just that distinction, I think, is important for everybody to understand, because it really is why data prep, why we brought it to market, and why we think it really helps the business user continue to own this entire integration cycle. So with that, why don't we jump right into a demo? So I'm going to share a different screen here. And so everybody can see my browser now. So OneCloud, again, is the platform. So OneCloud the company, OneCloud the platform. If you have OneCloud today, you may have noticed at the bottom of your screen, you have something that either says applications. If you have data prep enabled, I see some folks on the webinar today that actually have deployed OneCloud Data Prep in their environments. And if you just have OneCloud Integration Studio, this will say admin down here, assuming that you have administrator rights. But I can toggle back and forth between Integration Studio and Data Prep, which is very nice. This is, we don't have to go to a different website. We don't have to have an application installed. It's quite simply, everything's managed through the web, just like it is with Integration Studio. So in Data Prep, looks a little bit familiar, right? So here you have your pipeline results, and I'll explain what a pipeline is, but you can see there, what's the result, what's been happening in Data Prep, in this case, over the last 30 days. What have people been doing in Data Prep? So who's been updating what and when? And then a new concept in Data Prep is the idea of favorites. So if there's a particular component that I interact with consistently, I just want a shortcut to it. I can simply favorite it, and then I can click into there. So let's talk a little bit about the components of Data Prep, and let's get level set on some vocabulary here so that as we continue to walk through this demonstration, it starts to make sense. So we have 3 primary components. We have the data that needs to be transformed. That's pretty simple and straightforward. We won't spend any time talking about that. And then we have a pipeline. So a pipeline is the set of transformations that are going to be applied to that data, both the technical transformations that we talked about earlier, things like inserting a column or removing a column. And then we have the functional transformations, or the mappings, that are going to be assigned to that data. So then the third component is logically the mapping groups, because how we handle a technical transformation, it's kind of a one-off, one-time activity. Whereas the mapping groups, those are consistently being updated because the business is consistently being updated. Whether I have a reorganization, I've got M&A activity, maybe I've acquired a company, maybe I'm divesting something, those activities generally mean that there's some change to the mapping. Even something as, boring for me personally, because I'm not an accountant, but something as boring as an accounting restatement. And not because I need to restate results, but there's a new accounting treatment and I need to account for that in my mapping. All those activities, those are ongoing. And so we've split those out into mapping groups so that we can manage that consistent evolution of the business in a slightly different way. But again, it's part of pipelines. So let's take a look at a pipeline. So here we go. I've got my pipelines here, and I've got the set of pipelines that are available to me. And again, I've got my favorites. So for this webinar, I've created this. This is actually based on a customer's use case. So online retailer. They've got a data set that sits out there, and they're actually going to take that from that operational system and they're going to move it into their general ledger. And they're going to use OneCloud Data Prep in combination with OneCloud Integration Studio to achieve that end-to-end integration. But let's take a look at the transformation that needs to occur. Again, this is dummy data. This doesn't represent the customer's actual data. So, but it's based on the requirement. And it's kind of some neat things happening here. So the first thing that you see here, and this is what's unique about data prep, particularly for me, is this isn't very much an interactive application. I can see the operations as they're occurring, what's actually happening to the data as I define the transformations that need to be applied to it. So what you see here is just a raw preview of the data. This is before any transformation has happened. So you can see I've got these different columns or fields in the data. So I've got a date, I've got a country, revenue categories, and I've even got some different data values over here on the right-hand side. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is take a look down here at the transformations that are being applied. And you can see I've got a series of different transformations. And this is very much a blank canvas. You build them, the transformations you need as your business needs them. So with this, you don't have to think about this is the way OneCloud thinks we should do it. It's very much you build it as your business needs it to be built. So I like to call this very guided, but not prescribed. And that gives us much more flexibility in how we interact with our data. So at the bottom of the screen here, I've got what I call a data lineage transformation. And basically what I've done is I am copying a column because I want to be able to trace or create a data lineage of the transformations as they're being applied here. So I'm taking my customer country column and I'm creating another column from it called company. I'm doing the same thing for the revenue category and I'm calling that account. And then I'm doing the same thing for customer country and calling that region. Because as I go through my pipeline, I'm actually going to apply transformations. So in here, I have a company transformation, and this is actually using one of those mapping groups that we talked about before. You see a bit of a preview there. And you can see here, if I scroll a bit to the right, here's my company. And so I went from the company field, which is based on, which was copied from my data lineage based on the country, and transformed that functionally to something called company. And so I walk through and I continue my different transformations here. So I do my company, my account, my region, my revenue category. And then this feature is killer. I'm so excited about this. When we were sitting down and envisioning what will customers need, the engineers actually came up with this idea. And I loved it because we have a series of transformations that we can build in, but there's always going to be some edge case that we didn't think about, that we just don't have in the product yet. And so what we've done is we've embedded Excel formulas directly into the product. It's not a version of Excel that's kind of like Excel, but with our own flavor on it, it's quite truly an Excel formula. And so I can, if I don't have a transformation pre-built for me that handles what I need it to do, but I can articulate it in an Excel formula, well, then I can absolutely do the same thing here. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, when my reporting category, which is this field here, begins or does not begin with BS dash, which stands for balance sheet. I'll explain that in a moment. And the amount is less than zero. So basically I've got a negative amount. We know that credits are normally, or that revenue is normally a credit in a GL. Well, if I've got a negative amount, that's a refund, that's going to be a debit. So I populate my debit column, right, with that value. Otherwise, I put it into the credit column. And so I've got this Excel formula that I've embedded here to build in a transformation. Really interesting and really flexible, right? Because again, if we haven't envisioned it already, or we simply haven't created it in the product, this allows for you to create a transformation. Really love this feature. This one has me really excited. There's a lot that has me excited here, quite frankly. Right? So now that I've shown you a bit about pipelines, I want to jump over to mapping groups. We're going to come back to pipelines. I'm going to show you a bit more there, but I want to jump over to mapping groups because this is where it really all starts to come together. So a mapping group is a set of functional transformations that's going to get applied to the data. And I'm going to start with a pretty basic one here. So over here, I've got the company mapping. And this one has some nice things going on in here. So when I do what's called attach or pin a file sample data set to it, I can actually see the result of the transformations that I've defined against the data itself over here. That's a really nice feature for me, particularly because who knows, is there some other mapping rule that's getting applied here that I didn't think was going to get applied? So this is a nice way to see it as you're defining it. What's going to be the impact to the data? It might seem like it's obvious, but having done mapping multiple times, it's definitely one of those things that as your maps get more voluminous, it's difficult to understand which one is actually impacting the data. Now, the other thing that's interesting here is what we refer to as conditional based mapping. So in this, what I have is I'm saying, well, I want to map the company based on the country. I've built that association. And so that's the mapped company here. But in other cases, I actually need to look at the ledger currency and the transaction type to figure out where something goes. So over here, I'm saying if my transaction type begins with BS dash, basically balance sheet records, and so this is an and condition, my ledger currency is US dollar, well, then I'm going to map to the company called US or Acme-US. The reciprocal is this one where it's not equal to US dollar, but it begins with BS. And then it's mapping to the international company. Makes sense so far? Great. I realized that you guys don't have the ability to talk with me live, so I'll stop doing that. I apologize. And then otherwise, we're saying, okay, in this case, we just said we don't really care what the country is that's being mapped in. We care what the ledger currency is in combination with the transaction type for those first two maps. Everything else, we're interested in the country. And how that comes into play, let's take a look at the map or the pipeline here and see how that mapping actually impacts something. So over here, I have the ability to filter. I'm going to actually hide that. And so now I can filter this data. I could say, well, let me take a look at this particular country. So again, that's going to international. We kind of expect that, but look at that. In this case, the currency on the record was US dollar. So we needed to change the company. That all happened through that conditional based mapping. Even though it's AU across all of the different records, that conditional mapping took over and said, no, no, no. In this case, it actually changes to something different. So really powerful feature there. Let's jump back to the mapping groups and show you some other things that are interesting. So this is a basic exact map. So I'm saying that AU equals region developing. And I can have exact maps. I can have like maps where we use patterns, whether it's a star for multiple characters or a question mark for a single character. And I can even do more advanced pattern-based mapping with what we call regex. And so a lot of features there. I can combine any one of those three with the conditional based mapping. So it has that flexibility to do that against the exact maps, like maps, or regex maps. I can apply conditions to all of those different things. I can upload and download these things from a CSV file. So if I have a change and I want to be able to do a bulk update, I could simply download these, make those updates, and push them through. The other thing that I love showing people is this capability. So on this mapping group, this whole set of maps, what I'm saying is I actually have a start and an end date that I can apply to this particular data set. So in here, I can make my maps case sensitive. I can get rid of any leading or trailing white spaces, extra spaces in my at the beginning or the end of a particular value. But I can also say that as of 10/19/2020, which conveniently for this webinar was yesterday, this map no longer applies. Now this is my region mapping group. I've also got my region 2021. Let's assume that we're having this webinar on January 1, 2021, because everybody wants to know about transformation on New Year's Day. But in here, I've got a similar map, but today, it's active starting today. And there's one difference here in AU. In the old map, that was originally going to region developing. Now it's going to its own region because it's grown enough that it makes sense to split this out. So how does this all come together? Well, then when I go back to my pipeline, I can actually have both mapping groups right in my pipeline. So I went a little fast there. This is my series of transformations at the bottom of my pipeline. I can add a new one anywhere I like in the pipeline. So in this case, I'm going to add one right after the existing region one. And I'm going to select mapping. I'm going to say this is region for 2021. I'm going to select that mapping group. And now I'm going to build an association to say, well, which field do I actually want to map? Well, I still want to map the same one as before. So in this case, I'm going to take the customer country, or I take that back. I'm going to take the region because I've created that data lineage. I'm going to save that. And now I've just added a new transformation to my pipeline. And so I can publish that and make that active and able to be used. And I can see along here, I didn't really point this out before, but as you're going through these different transformations, so right here, I'm on region. And I'm going to just give us a little more space here. You can see that there's regions that are being transformed here. And you can see now region EU or AU, excuse me, is now being transformed based on that new mapping group. But if I click on this next transformation here, where I'm going to remove some columns from here, well, if you notice here, now all of a sudden, I've got an ability to see exactly what has happened to the data as the transformations have been assigned to it. So here I've gone through and I've actually removed a series of columns. And I can show you those. These are the columns that I removed out of the data set because I no longer need them. I wanted them as I worked through my pipeline, but at the end of it, I no longer need them. So I simply remove them. And I can visualize that as I'm working through that particular pipeline. So that's data prep. Let's look at it, how it works with OneCloud Integration Studio. So here I built a chain. And so we talked a bit before about this idea of BS dash, and that stands for balance sheet. And so this customer requirement came up because they've got an operational system that captures the transactions related to their, again, online retailer, their activity, basically their revenue activity. But they need to create a balanced entry to load into their general ledger. It's just the basic accounting principles, debits and credits, right? So what we've done here is we've mimicked that. And so we say, all right, we're going to go and grab that from a cloud-based storage, in this case, Amazon S3. We're going to create the offsetting entry by taking the records in that data set and simply duplicating them and adding a BS- indicator in front of the field called revenue category. And then we're going to run that through our pipeline. We're going to check for anything that's unmapped, because again, we're guided, but we're not prescriptive. So if you want to continue on, even though something hasn't been transformed, we give you that ability. If you want to stop the integration because you do detect that something's not been transformed, we give you that capability as well. So let's take a look at this in action. So here we go. Do a quick run here. And so this is grabbing the data from, again, Amazon S3. It created those duplicate records. And now it's running that series of transformations that we call a pipeline. And so those are done. And you can see here, I've obviously got a problem. I've got unmapped items. And so if I look on there, I get the unique values across each field that's been touched by a mapping transformation or a mapping group. And that shows me that in this case, I've got a company, France, that hasn't yet been mapped. So, okay, what do I do? Well, I can go back to data prep and I can go into my mapping groups and I can go into my company and I can look for France. And for the sake of the webinar, I put a Z in front of there so that it would never apply. So now I save that. I get a nice little preview of these are the changes that you're about to affect. So how does this, confirm that you're okay with these? If I click back, then it wouldn't be saved. But basically I save this and then I need to publish. And so you might ask yourself, well, why do I need to do those two steps? Well, this is actually really nice because I can stage a bunch of changes and then publish them at a future date. So it gives us flexibility there. I could also use the properties and end date something if I wanted to, or start date something. But this is another way to accomplish a similar thing where I've saved them, I've committed them back to OneCloud Data Prep as a platform, but I haven't actually applied them. But now I'm going to publish. And so that's all changed. And then I can go right back into Integration Studio and I can rerun my chain. And this time I should have no problems. And so when we look at this, I can see here, here's the data that came out and you can see what it looks like. So I've got date, customers, space, country, reporting category, so on. And when it's done with the pipeline, it looks like this. So now I've got a journal source in there. Do I want to submit? Company, account, region, total debits, total credits. And so it looks completely different because it's been transformed by the pipeline. So I've extracted, I've transformed, and now I'm getting ready to load. And in this case, I put together just a sample. This, done the wrong thing there. I put together a little sample. Let's say that the general ledger wants a JSON data payload. That's fine. We've got a nice little command in Integration Studio that takes the output of the pipeline and makes it JSON so that then it could be loaded into the general ledger. So that's OneCloud, the platform, both Data Prep and Integration Studio. Hope you found it to be interesting. I am going to jump back because I saw a few questions come in, but I certainly want to get over to questions and make sure I'm managing the time there. So let me jump back to the presentation. And so just in summary, before we get to questions, Integration Studio, what is it? It's the product that you formerly knew as OneCloud. It enables the business users to create, maintain, and execute both integration and automation processes. Again, in that ETL acronym, it's the E and the L. Transform, handled by Data Prep. Again, the business users can easily maintain those mapping definitions, those transformations that need to be applied to the data so that you're quite literally writing no code. And then finally, together, you've got OneCloud, the platform, where we've got Integration Studio and Data Prep coming together to really give you that end-to-end capability to own and manage that integration process. So with that, Q&A. I've got a few different things in Q&A, so I'll read the questions back and then I'll do my best to answer them here. So the question is, if we're trying to map multiple subledgers to a single ledger, is OneCloud Data Prep designed for this use case? And the answer to that is absolutely. You can have multiple pipelines, you can have multiple mapping groups, you can share the mapping groups. So even if you've got multiple subledgers, if there's some commonality around the chart of accounts, then you could absolutely reuse those those mapping groups across different pipelines. So that's a fantastic use case for OneCloud Data Prep. It's multiple different streams of data going into a single target system. So different subledgers rolling up into the general ledger. Absolutely fits there perfectly. Next question that came in: how does OneCloud Data Prep compare to Oracle FDME and Oracle Cloud Data Management? Would it make sense to use them together? So for those of you that don't know me, I came from the Oracle EPM professional services world, and I was very focused in on FDME and cloud data management. So hopefully my answer to this question with that background in mind gives you some credence that I know what I'm talking about here. So we think that Oracle is a very powerful organization, and they've created some great software out there. And FDME is quite frankly a bit inspirational. Some of the things that product brought to the market in its original kind of the reason it was created inspired us to think about those same ways to address our users and our users' needs. And the main thing around that is empowering the business user to own the transformation portion of the integration process and to own the entire integration process. So with that in mind, OneCloud Data Prep has taken cues from what Oracle FDME and Cloud Data Management are and provide. And we've also sought to address some of the things that customers don't like about that product and have been clamoring for in terms of improvements over the years. So for example, you can share what's called mapping in FDME or Cloud Data Management. And you do that across what's called locations. Well, when you share that mapping, you share all of the mappings. So if you're mapping 5 different fields or what's known as dimensions in the Oracle EPM space, you're sharing all 5 of those. With OneCloud Data Prep, you can share 1 and not the other 4. You could share 2. You could even make it more granular so that you're saying, I want to share this type of map. So I want to create a mapping group that's just the exact matches and share that and allow people to use that across their different integrations and not force you to share all the other things. So it's a bit more powerful on that front, or a lot more powerful. The other thing is performance of data prep is unbelievably phenomenal. Taking out the idea that you don't have to write any code to do any of this. You don't have to know SQL. You don't have to know Python. That's powerful in and of itself. But when you think about the performance side of things, I had a customer that we went through a proof of concept with them, and they have a data set that's about 250,000 records. And in FDME, it takes about 7 minutes to process a single period of data for them. About 2,000 maps. We were able to consolidate that down based on how our conditional maps can be applied across both exact, like, and regex. By doing that and consolidating it down, we got it down to just under 50. And that data set processes in about 19 seconds. So 7 minutes to 19 seconds, that's a pretty big pickup. That really trims a lot of time out of a cycle. And it may not, somebody may say, well, it's 6 minutes and 41 seconds. What's the big deal? The thing is, as you get into processing more data, maybe I'm doing more than just one period of data. All of a sudden that 7 minutes balloons to an hour or more. And then my process has now, been kind of bogged down there. So I think we address a lot of the things that FDME and Cloud Data Management provide and more. So I would, if you're familiar with those products and you want to learn more, by all means, feel free to reach out. We'd love to have a conversation and talk about how it could fit into your solution and your connected enterprise. Okay. Next question. Does OneCloud Data Prep require OneCloud Integration Studio? Can we use it with another integration solution? So great question there. Thank you for that. So OneCloud Data Prep is technically a standalone product. You can use Data Prep by itself. You don't have to use it in concert with OneCloud Integration Studio. If you don't use it with OneCloud Integration Studio, it can be invoked via a command line interface. And so it can be integrated into other solutions. So if your IT standard is, say, Informatica, and everything has to be managed through there, but you want to own that transformation layer. Because again, the business is constantly changing and iterating and evolving, and the business knows that relationship the best. They also need to be able to respond to it faster than, say, a traditional IT-based process where you need to submit a ticket, get prioritized in a queue, and then eventually the transformation gets updated based on what somebody's told you. If you want to bypass that and really empower the business, but still work within the construct of this is our IT integration standard, you absolutely could. So you could take data using Informatica, extract it from some system, pass it to OneCloud Data Prep, have it perform the transformations, and then OneCloud Data Prep sends back the data set that then Informatica, as an example, could pick up and then load to another system. So absolutely, OneCloud Data Prep can function standalone, but there really is a nice synergy there with OneCloud Integration Studio and giving you a united platform. All right, another question coming in here. Can you clarify the Excel functions? Does this product require Excel? So thank you for that question. I should have been much more explicit about this. No, you don't require Excel. There's no Excel that needs to be installed locally where the ground runner is installed, none of that. It is truly embedded into the product. There's no licensing that you need to worry about. It is a function that's built into the product. So it does not require Excel anywhere. Another question here, can we get training for data prep? It's almost like somebody's teeing these up on purpose, and believe me, folks, we're not. So one of my goals as Chief Customer Officer is customer success. That's actually my overarching goal. And so part of that is making sure that our customers are empowered and that they have the ability to be successful with our products. So to that end, we've launched an LMS, or a learning management system. And so I'm feverishly working on a training class. It will be at no cost. It will be available to anybody that is on the platform. So if you're interested in having that class enabled for you once it is launched, and I expect that in the next no more than 3 weeks, and hopefully less than that, that will be available. And just shoot an email to learning@onecloud.io, and we will gladly set you up. Okay. Next question is, what are the optional output formats and where the output can be stored? So the output that's produced by OneCloud is similar to the outputs, or OneCloud Data Prep is similar to the outputs that are produced by other OneCloud Integration Studio commands. You, at the end of that, you get it's a CSV file. Now, whether it's comma delimited, tab delimited, pipe delimited, you get to choose that, but at the end of the day, it's a flat file. And that flat file can be pushed anywhere you want it to go. So if you understand how OneCloud Integration Studio works, it works through its inputs and outputs throughout the execution. And at the end, you've got a result. You can then take the result of that output and you could save it locally onto your network, into a folder that's outside of the OneCloud processing directories. You could put it into cloud-based storage. You could load it directly into the application where that data needs to go. So you've got a lot of different capabilities there. Hopefully that answered your question. Another question here is, could the mapping groups be coming from other systems and integrated with OIS? So the two-part question there. So just quick clarification there. You could use OIS, or you will be able to use OIS to upload the mappings into OneCloud Data Prep. There will also be a command line capability to do that as well if you're not using OneCloud Integration Studio. Today, you don't have the ability to source those mapping definitions from another system, but that is on our immediate term roadmap. We just met actually this week to talk about that. And so that is something that will absolutely be coming. We expect that no later than Q1 of 2021. All right. Next question is, are there options for customers that use OneCloud via Workiva, also known as WChains, to use data prep? So great question. So OneCloud Data Prep is a product that is solely available to OneCloud customers. Now, if you're using Workiva W Chains, which is an OEM version of OneCloud Integration Studio, you can absolutely use it in concert with W Chains. So, but the thing is, you would be a OneCloud customer for OneCloud Data Prep at that point. So you would need to become a OneCloud Data Prep customer. And then within W Chains, you'll have the Data Prep Biz app that will allow you to invoke OneCloud Data Prep pipelines. Next question is, I'm reading through it just to make sure that I understand it and so that I can play it back, because there's also been some just comments in the questions here. So the question is OneCloud Data Prep included with the standard OneCloud license, or is it an additionally licensed product? So the answer is it's an additionally licensed product. Again, it can be used in concert with OneCloud Integration Studio, but it is a standalone product that is licensed separately. That said, we've gone through a number of iterations on our licensing to try to make sure that customers can use these two products very complementary. So if you are interested in seeing how Data Prep can help you and understanding the licensing impacts, we encourage you to reach out to us, sales@onecloud.io. Next question is, can Data Prep work directly with large data tables in a relational database like ADW, Autonomous Data Warehouse? That's Oracle's Autonomous Data Warehouse. So OneCloud Data Prep does not connect directly to any systems. We very much believe that OneCloud Integration Studio is the mechanism for that, and then it passes that data to OneCloud Data Prep. Now, that said, we can handle large volumes of data very, very well. And you heard me cite a little bit earlier the performance around that particular customer's POC, where a quarter of a million records processing in 19 seconds. So you could use OneCloud Integration Studio, connect to Autonomous Data Warehouse, extract that data out, pass it to Data Prep to perform the transformations, and the performance would be exactly what you would expect it to see. Next question. You mentioned some users have already deployed Data Prep. If we haven't, how can we get access? So we reach out to us directly. I recognize your name and I know which organization you're part of, so thank you for the question. By all means, reach out to us through any of the mechanisms. So sales@onecloud.io, info@onecloud.io, the in-app chat. You can start to chat with us there. We'll shift it over to an email-based conversation, whatever's comfortable for you. We'll actually reach out after this call. Thank you for the question. But if you are a customer of OneCloud Integration Studio today and you want to learn more about it and any one of those mechanisms, reach out to us and we're happy to have a conversation. And then the last question I've got here is, are there performance limitations for the CSV files? Can it handle millions of lines? I am incredibly confident saying absolutely it can handle millions of lines. There's always some upper limitation to a system. I haven't found it yet with this one. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to have enough ego to say that there isn't one, because there absolutely always is. But millions or tens of millions of records, even hundreds of millions of records, we've done it, and we're confident that in the performance around it. But that said, let's talk. If you've got a use case you want to explore, we can absolutely do that. So with that, I think we're just about at time here. And so I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for attending today. If you have more questions, by all means, reach out to us at any one of these contact points here that are on the screen, and we'd love to have a conversation. So thank you, everybody, for your attention and your time today. And we look forward to telling you more about Data Prep in the coming months.